This was a recording of the first in a series of YouTube's videos that I want to make, and I'm calling this the introduction to the Put on the Whole Armor of God unit. And it's to sort of sketch out the territory that we need to go. I'm very concerned that I get these things recorded and turned into videos because I was put on a different medication as an inhaler for my emphysema, and I began to lose my voice. And it scared me because right now I'm the only person on earth who knows this stuff in the way that it's arranged and how it comes together. And if I lost my power of speech, I don't know how we would ever get access to it out onto the internet. And if you've been listening to my voice, you know that I haven't got it back entirely, but it's improved enough, and I want to press on. So I'm going to do the recording on this first one today. Now, what we're dealing with here is the Antichrist versus the Gospel of Jesus Christ battle that's going on. And I intend to focus rather narrowly in this to show that there are things that you can be learning about the issues that we're facing right now as a people. And one of the big ones is that the young people are experiencing all kinds of anxiety and depression and despair. Now, I'm not going to try to tell you I have a magic bullet. I'm not going to try to tell you that the things I've discussed or discovered are the full answer, but they certainly give you some perspective and will help you resolve your own questions that you can go to the Lord with and seek inspiration, revelation from the Spirit as how to use these in interventions to help the people you see who are challenged and having problems. As a way of introduction, reading from my script, I'll start by saying, what's wrong? As Brother Razban says in the Church News, February 17th, 2019, these are some of the things that young people fear. Not being accepted by friends, academic performance, pressures and problems at home they can't solve. They fear they can trust no one, and no one trusts them. They fear being alone. They fear being in groups. They fear there is no solution or relief from their pain. Now, I suggest to you that within the 8 domains discussed in the study guide, there are solutions, or at least excellent approaches to solutions for all of these things. Anyway, discouragement, despair, and anxiety and depressions are all products of such fears. All of these are the byproducts of a view of life that's put forward by the Antichrists down through time. And we'll demonstrate that a little bit today to show you that this is the source of much of this. And it has quietly permeated our culture, contaminated it. But there are answers. I can't counsel you enough to dig into that study guide. Start studying with those scholars. Develop some insight and resources. And let's try to help these young people overcome these things. It says, as you design your intervention, you should profile your learning to see if these things or things like them are present in their lives. Now there's a talk by Paul V. Johnson on free to choose liberty. Incidentally, I'm going to put much of this material into thumbnails that will appear with the videotape, and they'll tell you where you can find them in the study guide or elsewhere, so you don't have to try just to remember it. Anyway, Paul V. Johnson's talk on free to choose liberty. Okay, I've got it down as being given November 6th, 2012. I'm assuming it's a BYU talk. For some reason I didn't get that citation down. But anyway, he contrasts the effects of building a life and a character on one or the other of these theories. We're talking about either there is no Christ, there is no God, you're alone in the world, or there's a gospel being sponsored by Jesus Christ and a loving Heavenly Father that gives us a refuge. Brother Johnson says, today there are many individuals promoting or condoning sin, and parts of our culture also carry these dangerous messages. For example, we see in the media a lot of modeling of sins with seemingly no negative consequences. We see meanness, law-breaking, disrespect, breaking the law of chastity, immodesty, profanity, and almost a constant stream. Many times, goodness and righteousness are portrayed as naive and silly at best and evil at worst. And that's from his talk, Free to Choose Liberty. We find this a lot in watching even the Hallmark Channel, which we watch a lot of. In very many of those movies, they never mention godliness or Christianity or Christ. They talk about karma, and they talk about fate, and they talk about the union, the universe, but God has been taken out of it. Thankfully, there are other Hallmark movies that are based around religious faith, and I'm glad somebody's still making them. Anyway, let's move on. Harris has produced a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, and that's available over the internet. It says, is agreement on moral values possible? Is there an objective morality that has claims on all men and women, or must we construct our own individual, situational moralities? Now, the Antichrist would have us believe that we can't have an objective morality. There is no objective truth. Viktor Frankl, and I don't know if you know who Viktor Frankl is. He was in a concentration camp and in utter despair and ready to die, give it up. And then he overcame that. And then afterwards, even down to the present time perhaps, although by now he's got to be pretty old. Anyway, he comments on the despair of youth today who find themselves in what he calls an existential vacuum. In modern days, the doctrines of the Antichrist has found a home in a system of philosophy called existentialism. And it will be our work to examine some of this. Anyway, they find themselves in what he calls an existential vacuum, where each person is the center of his own universe, where there is a denial that there are any claims upon him or her which come from without himself. When we look at Korihor and Nehor's words, you'll see what this is. Also, in modern times, you have Sartre and Kierkegaard. It says all morality in this vacuum is subjective. If this is true, we must consider that in the world today, there are actually now about 9 billion moralities, with 9 billion people going their own way, denying that any objective principles may govern the relatedness between people. Yet the fact is that the search for these objective principles and the longing for relatedness is a universal reality, inborn and animated by the universal gift of the light of Christ. Those are my words in parentheses. It's also felt as a personal experiential reality. The fact is that people cannot and do not want to live unrelated to other people. But if they follow the doctrines and dogmas of the Antichrists and the existentialists, they're left with no alternative, because these people deny that there's anything outside the individual that gives them structure or organizes their lives or anything like that. Now there's an immediate answer for this, and I would suggest you go to it. I'll put it in a thumbnail for you. It's called Inviting Moral Relativism to be Irrelevant. And it's a talk given at the Wheatley Institute. I downloaded it and printed it out for myself. I'll give you the location. Now, this is by Dr. Terry Olson, who happens to live in my ward. He and I have been neighbors and ward members most of our adult lives, so I know him very well. Anyway, his article from 2017 speaks directly to this issue with a proven educational intervention that has been instituted widely in teacher training classes, and that has proven especially effective in that critical age group of 7th and 8th graders. And our studies together will show us that it's the 7th and 8th grade mentality, development of the mind-brain complex, where things start to come off the rails, where the seeds of apostasy are being planted. Anyway, this educational intervention of which he speaks is a program that he taught in school districts all over the Intermountain West, at least. And it has to do with helping a person find within themselves, out of their own experience, relativism. I hope you'll flag this and stay with it, because he offers you a key to helping young people and others resolve this issue. And this is what I'm saying. This will be the keystone of my activities in the intervention that I'm modeling, because it involves helping the learner look inside themselves and to find their concrete proof that moral relativism is a false proposition, that each of us has the light of Christ, and thus the gospel is true, and they can learn to trust Jesus and apply his method in their lives to sustain them until their mind-brain matures sufficiently for them to understand the principles that undergird the culture of godliness, the society of Melchizedek and Enoch, which is Zion. Another quote, proactively given, dynamic, living, godly culture is the armor, shield, and sword we can give to our offspring. We're just going to keep coming back to culture again and again. We depend a lot on Edward T. Hall and his book, The Silent Language. The first part of this study guide is devoted to Hall and some others. It's just that rather than being isolated as the Antichrist would have us believe and all alone in the world, we're immersed in cultures. Great variety. Let me read this to you. This is from Hall. Probably the most difficult point to make, and make clearly, is that not only is culture imposed on man, but it is man in a greatly expanded sense. Culture is the link between human beings and the means they have of interacting with others. The meaningful richness of human life is the result of the millions of possible combinations involved in a complex culture. He makes the point in his work that we build our personalities based on cultural expectations. We understand something of what people expect from us, or what our culture offers us, and we produce a personality, a character that exists within that culture. So I can only say again that the study of these things in the study guide is so important. There's no way I can characterize 300 pages of really good, intense research in a few YouTube videos. This is only to give you some insight as to the variety of things that are available, and also citations where you can go and study for yourself. This is a little more of what Hall says. A real understanding of what culture is will help people learn where they are and who they are. It will prevent them from being pushed around by the more voracious, predatory, and opportunistic of their fellow men, who take advantage of the fact that the public is not usually aware of those shared formal norms which give coherence to our society. You watch the news lately? More and more people are using the word tribe, saying that our culture and our society is breaking down. There's no universally accepted rules anymore. And people are becoming more tribal in their actions, them against the world and so on. This is very clear evidence that this doctrine of the Antichrists is really taking a deep root in our culture right now. It's always been here. But now this inability to believe in anything is just getting more and more pervasive, and the reason is that the structures of our culture that in the past have communicated these things are no longer in favor. They're no longer being listened to or followed. People have moved away from them. And because we don't have a common agreement, we got a problem. That's why the culture of godliness, which gives us training and insight onto how to live our lives, and how to organize our society. And then we have the society of Melchizedek and Enoch, which is Zion, which is also very powerful. It just has to be implemented. Remember that part of this whole YouTube thing is saying that in order for progress to be made, 2 generations must agree. Hall continues, by broadening his conception of the forces that make up and control his life, the average person can never again be completely caught in the grip of pattern behavior of which he has no awareness. Making these things explicit, pointing them out, so that the young people or others with immature minds understand what's going on around them, what the issues are. And that's why we need to study this and especially these things about the Antichrist and the agents who espouse their doctrines.